Presence audiobook. Part 1. Learning to See. The Requiem Scenario. November 2000. The four of us were sitting in a circle in the study of Otto's home on Maple Avenue in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Outside, a light snow was falling. Inside, under the windows, Otto had placed bright red poinsettias. The walls were covered with charts, several with large U drawn on them, several with a large U drawn on them. Books were neatly stacked everywhere, and in one corner a computer hummed quietly. When Otto said that Jurassic Park was written in this house, I couldn't help thinking how ironic it was, given our conversations, said Betty Shue. How now here we are, sitting in the house of the dinosaurs, talking about a real-life nightmare scenario. The destruction of our environment, the growing social divide between rich and poor, the potential dangers of thinking like biotechnology, and escalating violence around the world. Isn't it ironic the way people talk about dinosaurs? Peter said. Today we say an organization is just like a dinosaur, when we mean it's slow and can adjust to change. But the dinosaurs did manage to survive over 100 times longer than humans have so far. Whatever being might take our place here in the future, we probably say, just like the human beings, too bad they didn't have the adaptive capabilities of dinosaurs. Betty Sue shuddered. Hearing human beings talked about in the past tense like that is terribly chilling. I guess we all know that since we have the means to destroy ourselves, it's possibly that we will. The unthinkable is possible, but it's still very difficult to consider. The poet Odin said, "We must love one another or die." No one thinks we're very close to loving one another just yet, but we also don't seem willing to consider the consequences of not doing so. And that's why we don't change, Peter replied. I was speaking at a conference on business and the environment last week and stayed at a conference center that I first visited 20 years ago. This center hosts a conference every year, and at which a prestigious environmental sustainability award is given. So you would expect it to be a showcase for environmentally sound practices, but I'm sure this place generates more waste per customer than they did 20 years ago. Everything is individually wrapped: coffee, sugar, shampoo, and each container will thrown away. The materials used in the room were no more environmentally sound than they had been 20 years ago. The wood hadn't been sustainably harvested. The plastics and materials couldn't be recycled, and the appliances couldn't be remanufactured. I had asked for a room where I could open the windows. They didn't have any because they relied on central air conditioning and heating. The electricity that drove their air conditioning undoubtedly came mostly from power plants that burned coal and other fossil fuels, heating up the earth in order to cool off our rooms. Then I saw this little bar of soap, individually wrapped, somehow epitomized the whole situation. Those soaps end up being 90% wasted. Waste that is completely unnecessary. They could easily be replaced by liquid soap dispensers that create almost no waste. There are even biodegradable liquid soaps now. One is manufactured by a supplier in Sweden, partly owned by Scandic, which has gone from a mediocre financially strapped business to one of Sweden's most financially successful hotel chains, in part through its commitment to the sustainable hotel room. There's no reason being environmentally smart There's no reason being environmentally smart can't be good for business as well, at least in Sweden, sorry. So I stood there looking at the little bar of soap, listening to my air conditioning whirl in the background, feeling angrier and angrier, and wondered why this American conference center still haven't learned in 20 years what the Swedish hotel chain had earned in a few years. Why were we even still bothering to hold conferences about environmental business practices? Do we Americans care about the effects that we're having on the natural environment that all life must share? Then I saw the only artifact of environmental consciousness in the whole room, a little card that said, in order to help the environment, we won't do your linens if you don't ask us to. Give me a break. After 20 years, after 20 years, all we've accomplished is they don't wash our linens if we don't ask them to. We've all known the frustration and discouragement you were feeling, said Betty Sue. At least I have. But are you saying that we avoid these issues to avoid the discouragement? Not quite, Peter paused and continued quietly. I had a difficult meditation this morning. It was very disturbing, as sometimes they are. I seem to be in touch with an extraordinary fear, just the fear by itself, no thoughts or associations. This fear is probably present more than I'm willing to see, except when it suddenly spoke through like it did this morning. The anger I felt at the hotel came from this deeper fear. I'd known about the threats to the environment for so long, but the changes we've made are so small given what's needed and what we're capable of achieving. In the future, it's going to be different. We have to go far beyond these little piecemeal gestures and begin to see the system in which we're embedded. And I suggest I have doubts if we're up for this. The question isn't, do you want your bed linens changed? It's more like, do you want to change the way you live? But this question sits on top of an immense fear. And I think that Betty Sue is one of the person who prefer not to think or talk about these things. Joseph leaned forward, but isn't that why we're here? Haven't we come together to answer one fundamental question? Why don't we change? What would it take to shift the whole? We don't change because we think we're immortal. Otterstone was matter of fact, like teenagers. We might be afraid, but we still think we'll go on forever. Perhaps that's true, said Joseph, shaking his head. I recently read an article that's been circulating in the foundation community written by a man named Jack Miles, a senior advisor to the J.A. Paul Getty Trust, called Global Requiem First. It is a speculation about what would happen if we started to realize that humankind might not overcome these problems, that we might not develop a sustainable society, that the human race might perish. It's an exploration of the unthinkable. But don't but 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 don't scenarios like the evoke but don't scenarios like that evoke the fear Peter is talking about? Otto asked. As he showed, this sort of fear is usually met by denial or simply makes us feel hopeless. But that doesn't have to happen, just replied. I've seen many instances where imagine alternative futures, even negative futures, can actually open people up. Scenarios can alter people's awareness, Betty agreed. If they're used artfully, people actually begin to think about future. Be, sorry. If they're used to artfully, people actually begin to think about a future that we've ignored or denied. The key is to see the different future, not as inevitable, but as one of several genuine possibilities. Maybe if people really believed we could be headed for extinction, we would do collectively what many people do individually when they know the way may actually die. Sorry. I will repeat that again. Maybe if people really believe we could be headed for extinction, we could do collectively what many people do individually when they know they may actually die. We would suddenly see our lives very clearly. If we could actually face our collective mortality and simply tell the truth about the fear rather than avoiding it, perhaps something would shift, Peter said. Several years ago, in one of the leadership workshops several years ago, in one of our leaders workshops, a Jamaican man from World Bank named Fred told a story that moved people very deeply. A few years earlier, he had been diagnosed with a terminal disease. After consulting a number of doctors who all confirmed the diagnosis, he went through what everyone does in that situation. For weeks, he denied it, but gradually, with the help of friends, he came to grips with the fact that he was only going to live a few more months. Then something amazing happened. He said, I simply stopped doing everything that wasn't essential. That didn't matter. I started working on projects with kids that I'd always wanted to do. I stopped arguing with my mother. When someone cut me off in traffic or something happened that would have upset me in the past, I didn't get upset. I just didn't have the time to waste on any of that. Near the end of this period, Fred began a wonderful new relationship with a woman who thought that he should get more opinions about his condition. He consulted some doctors in the state and soon after got a phone call saying, we have a different diagnosis. The doctor told him he had a rare form of a very curable disease. And then came the part of the story I'll never forget. Fred said, when I heard this over the telephone, I cried like a baby because I was afraid my life would go back to the way it used to be. It took a scenario that he was going to die for Fred to wake up. It took that kind of shock for his life to be transformed. Maybe that's what needs to happen for all of us, for everyone who lives on Earth. That could be what a Requiem scenario offers us. There was silence for a moment. You know, said Joseph quietly. When all is said and done, the only change that will make a difference is the transformation of the human heart. End of chapter 1.